launching a moving vehicle.
He says the patient had suffered a left-hand side limp and appeared quite stressed. The witness had earlier been rescued and taken to Kandere police post before he was transferred to the hospital. Police Constable Tuwei Began confirmed that he was among the 5 police officers from the Kandere police post who found the witness outside the police station. He says they picked the patient and took him to Kendu Bay Hospital.
There was bruises on both arms and both knees because the trouser was torn.
Was it necessary for all 5 of you with rifles to simply go and pick someone and take to the hospital? Or were you expecting a more serious situation?
Because someone had been abducted and we were going to drove all over that.
Migori Governor Kotho Bado, his former personal assistant Michael Oyamo and former county clerk Kaspar Obiero are standing trial in the murder that occurred in September 2018. The Rongo University student was brutally murdered and her body dumped in a thicket in Oyugis, Homa Bay County. She was stabbed 8 times while 7 months pregnant. Her body was found on the 4th of September 2018. Governor Bado is also facing a 73 million shilling corruption case together with 4 of his children and other accused persons. Zainab Ismail, NTV.
And elsewhere, Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha has hit out at the political class for making statements against the competency-based curriculum, insisting that their threats to revert back to the 844 systems are untenable. Magoha was speaking in Machakos County, where he supervised infrastructure in schools. And as Leila Mohammed reports, Magoha says that all plans have been put in place to usher in the first CBC class to junior secondary in January 2023.
The conversation about the quality of education that learners across the country are currently receiving and the plans for the future of learning in Kenya has dominated political gatherings lately, with the Kenya Kwanza Brigade early this week strongly pushing for a review of the CBC system.
Sisi kama Kenya Kwanza tukiingia pale tutang'oa hiyo, tuweke mfumo wa elimu ambao unaeleweka na ambao utachunga kila mtu. Hatutaki tuwe na mfumo wa elimu ambao unasaidia wale mabonyenye na watoto wao na unagandamiza watoto wa maskini ambao tunataka tuinue.
Such sentiments haven't been well received by the leadership of the Ministry of Education.
We have carried our own children, which we have produced with our own blood by the grace of God, through PP1, PP2, grade 1, up to grade 6, and they are sitting the exam in less than a year. Do you think these people will allow you to mess up with their children?
Magoha has confirmed that all national examinations are ready and it's all systems go. The government has already completed 6,400 classrooms across the country in the first phase for CBC in preparation for January next year. But some parents have expressed their concerns with the system.
Ukiangalia jinsi ambavyo inafanya na pia jinsi ambavyo anaingia miaka ambao anaingia nayo katika shule za sekondari, utaona pia kuna hiyo ugumu kidogo.
Ngumu sana kwetu wazazi, sababu kazi nyingi wazazi wanapewa kuja wafanya na watoto nyumbani, kazi ambao tulifikiria itakuwa inasaidia watoto wafanyie shuleni.
Fabian Muli says that the change from 844 to CBC has a lot of expectations and isn't that easy and comes at a cost.
The change will never be easy. The change will not come without expenses. Because right now, as we speak, we are doing continuous assessment. The competence base is normally done in second world countries. The challenge we'll have with CBC is lack of electricity.
The CS says that whilst there have been challenges with the system, they are doing all their best to enable a stable learning environment for learners. Leila Mohammed, NTV.
And the East African Business Council says that trade flows between Kenya and Tanzania are up or on the app following efforts by Presidents Uhuru Kenyatta and Samia Suluhu Hassan. According to the Council, Kenya-Tanzania bilateral trade has recorded a significant growth in the last 6 months, with more than 250 trucks cleared daily at the Namanga one-stop border post. Speaking during a trade facilitation forum held at Namanga, stakeholders from the two neighboring countries stated that cross-border trade has increased by 50%. The Council is rooting for harmonized policies in member states to facilitate seamless cross-border trade, anticipating double-digit trade growth by the end of 2022.
We need to reactivate and rejuvenate the Joint Border Coordination Committee so that these committees can address some of the emerging challenges, some that are caused by COVID, but also some NTBs that are hindering the intra-regional trade, by that trade between Tanzania and Kenya.
Sira changamoto tunapata kama watoza ushuru ni vile wafanyabiashara wengine wanapita msituni, lakini tunajaribu kuwaambia wapitie kwa station ndio tuwasaidie.
And elsewhere, an estimated 13 million people in Kenya, Somalia and Ethiopia are facing severe hunger as the Horn of Africa experiences its worst drought in decades, according to the United Nations. Rainy seasons have failed as the region has recorded its driest conditions since 1981.
Water and grazing land is in short supply, and forecasts of below-average rainfall in the coming months only threaten more misery. The UN says that harvests have been ruined, livestock have died or are dying, and hunger is growing as recurrent droughts affect the Horn of Africa. The situation requires immediate humanitarian action in order to avoid a repeat of a crisis like that of Somalia in 2011, when 250,000 died of hunger during a prolonged drought.
We only see dust storms now. We are afraid that they will cover us all and become our graveyard.
Food aid is being distributed across an arid swath of Kenya, Ethiopia and Somalia, and some 13 million people are at risk of severe hunger in the first quarter of this year.
We need to provide the important crisis-driven tools and resources that the pastoralists need, but we also need to make sure that we are more innovative, more forward-looking, and we think about ways to solve these kinds of climate-driven challenges.
According to the United Nations, around 2.9 million people in eastern Kenya are in urgent need of aid, and more than 500,000 children are acutely malnourished.
The drought is already very severe, animals are dying, and we need to act together before people start to die.
The UN Children's Agency meanwhile assesses that as many as 20 million people in those three countries, plus Eritrea, will need water and food assistance over the next 6 months. The WFP said $327 million is required to respond to immediate needs over the next 6 months and support pastoral communities to become more resilient against recurring climate shocks. Experts say extreme weather events are happening with increased frequency and intensity due to climate change, with Africa, which contributes the least to global warming, bearing the brunt. Leila Mohammed, NTV.
Into a story that really brought light into rising cases of gender-based violence and the late Agnes Tirop, Kenya's world record holder and two-time world championship bronze medalist, who was found stabbed to death in her home in Iten, Elgeyo-Marakwet County on October 13th, was buried in her home village on the day she would have turned 26. Ibrahim Rotich is alleged to have stabbed Tirop multiple times, leaving her mutilated body on the bed of their house in Iten before trying to escape. The incident has shone the spotlight on violence against women in Kenya. Take a look.
The news of Agnes Tirop's death spread fast, and within no time, family, friends, fellow athletes and curious onlookers arrived at her home in the outskirts of Iten town. According to police, Tirop's family had filed a missing persons report at the Iten police station Tuesday and had launched investigations before receiving new reports from the husband's family claiming they had received an alarming phone call from their son.
Iko maneno ambayo ilitoka kwa jamii ya bwana yake Tirop
ambao walisema ya kwamba bwana alikuwa amepigia wasasi akilia, akiwaelezea kwamba Mungu amsamehe, iko kitu ambayo amefanya.
Keyo North Sub-County Police Commander Tom Makori says the police discovered her body after accessing her house.
Wakati waliingia ndani, wamempata Tirop akiwa huko kwa kitanda. Damu iko chini ya kitanda na damu imemwagika chini ambao sio kidogo. Wakati waliangalia mwili ni kama amedungwa kitu kwa shingo, ambao tunajaribu kusema ya kwamba ende ikawa ni kitu kama kisu.
Those close to her say she had seemed anxious in their last interactions. The athlete allegedly had differences with her husband and had even relocated to her training camp before returning to her house last weekend.
On Monday at 4, I talked to her through the phone and we were to meet at town, so it has happened. It's unfortunately.
Akaniambia hizi shida nimekuwa nazo ni nyingi na sitakuelezea sasa, ambapo naweza kukuambia kuja baada ya mwezi kesho ambayo haijafika hata.
Agnes Tirop amekuwa ni rafiki wetu wa karibu, amekuwa ni jirani wetu, na yenye imetokea wote kama wakimbiaji tunasikia uchungu. Saba amekuwa ni mtu mpole, hajakuwa na maneno mingi, na hata jinsi mnavyojua ametuwakilisha Kenya juzi.
According to the police, the former World Cross Country Championship gold medalist might have been killed Tuesday night, and they were looking for her husband who went into hiding.
Bila shaka ni ya kwamba ako na ujumbe kamili. Kama si yeye, basi ako na ujumbe kifo ilitokeaje.
Agnes Tirop represented Kenya in the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, where she finished 4th in the 5,000 meters race. She won bronze in 10,000 meters at the World Championships in 2017 and 2019. In a message of condolence, President Uhuru Kenyatta mourned Agnes as a Kenyan hero and champion whose death is a big blow to the country's sporting ambitions and profile. President Kenyatta further ordered speedy and thorough investigations into her killing.
All right, and even as we await justice to be served as far as her case is concerned, may she continue to rest in eternal peace. But of course, in honor of Agnes Tirop, who was murdered allegedly by her husband, there is a World Cross Country Tour organized tomorrow. And of course, a number of races have been slated, including a 10-kilometer senior men and women race. And of course, we also have a number of international athletes who have been invited. And of course, some of them started arriving. And of course, we'll give you more details on the cross-country tour a little bit later during the show, so you want to stick around for that. But remember what we're asking you today, and that is, as far as rising cases of gender-based violence is concerned, we're asking you who should be held accountable as far as the rising cases of gender-based violence is concerned. Again, who should be held accountable for the rising cases of gender-based violence? Keep tweeting at NTV Kenya at Lubembe_Winnie. Alternatively, give us a call. The numbers are down on your screen, or will be down on your screen in just a moment. Let's just discuss this whole aspect of gender-based violence, because it has been here for a very long time. We keep talking about it, but then we see very little done to make sure that people get justice, and that is as far as the survivors is concerned. So you want to chime in again, feel free to interact with us. Send us a tweet at NTV Kenya at Lubembe_Winnie, or better yet, give us a call as well. If you have ever encountered any form of gender-based violence, then feel free to give us a call and share your story with us. But right with me in studio is an amazing panel, and right to my immediate left is Annette Nerima, who's a program manager at KHRC. Thank you very much for making time for us this morning. Really, really appreciate your time. We also have Sadat Abdullahi, who is a gender-based violence survivor. Thank you very much for making time for us, Abdullahi. And also we have Alberta Wambua, who is Executive Director, Gender Violence Recovery Center, or GVRC. Alberta, thank you very much for making time for us this morning. And also on Zoom, joining us on Zoom is Viola Chepto-Lagat, who is an athlete. Viola, thank you very much as well for making time for us this morning. And Alberta, let me just start with you, because most of the time when we mention gender-based violence, most of the times the first thing that comes to mind is the women. So just help us understand the whole aspect of gender-based, violence.
Thank you, and good morning, viewers. So gender-based violence is any physical, sexual, psychological harm or physical aggression or sexual coercion, psychological abuse, controlling behavior that's perpetrated on someone and either to gain power or to maintain power or to control. And gender-based violence is can happen to both men and women. And yes, I agree with you that most times when we talk about gender-based violence, we think it's the women. It's not a women's issue, it's a human rights issue. But why people always think it's women is because of different things, including that where I work and also in Kenya, we see that most of the survivors of gender-based violence are usually women at 90%. Yeah. And again, also how we are socialized is that women are the weaker sex. So a lot of times, even when men are abused, they're not going to speak up, you know, or very few of them are going to seek support or services. So that's why most of the times people tend to think that gender-based violence is, you know, you're only just thinking about women, but it's good to know that all these other forms of violence that I've mentioned actually also can be perpetrated and are perpetrated to men.
To men as well. And I'm happy that we have Abdullahi here today to just give us like a men's perspective, and especially when it comes to gender-based violence, to make it clear that, listen, it's not only a women's issue, but again, like Alberta says, human rights violation issue. All right. And Alberta, again, we have like various forms of gender-based violence, right? Can we just go through them very quickly?
Yes, yes, Winnie. So the different forms of gender-based violence, there's sexual violence, and there's physical violence, there's psychological abuse, there's, and in each one of them, there are different, of course, forms based on gender and things like that. There's also economic violence, there's, you know, there's psychological, also the emotional abuse. And one thing I would like to mention is that at GVSC, the most form of violence that would receive would be sexual violence at 76% of the cases that we receive. And yes, violence happens across ages. That's last weekend we lost a newborn baby who had been, you know, dumped to try to provide medical treatment. So it happens across ages. It takes different forms. I'd like to mention also that sometimes it can even be denial of rights, you know, not going to school and all that. And a lot of times you get different forms of abuse, you know, to one person. So you could be sexually assaulted, but it affects you psychologically. You could be undergoing domestic violence. And just today I was listening to a YouTube conversation about the women athletes and the forms of abuse they get. So it's very hard to get just one form of abuse. So there's psychological, there was the killings we're talking about, there's economic violence. So it's very important also that when we provide the support, we are providing a holistic form of support for the survivors.
For the survivors, all right. And Annette, again, Alberta mentioned something that I think we really need to think about, and that is control and power. And someone might ask, what is it about power and the need to have control that sometimes pushes people to, you know, do things that, again, ends up, you know, for instance, taking other people's lives?
Thanks, and good morning to our viewers as well. For me, when you talk about power, globally, how we are socialized, we've seen that there's the superiority of more so the men over women in all aspects of life. So we have a patriarchal structure, and that means that there is power differences in how we are socialized. You know, there's this understanding that women are the weaker sex, you know, and this cuts across both political, social, economic, religious, and even the legal aspect of it, culturally, you know. And so by that, you realize, for instance, when you talk about the economical aspect of it, we've been made to understand that it's men perhaps who have financial muscles, you know, and as such, maybe people or the men, for instance, would want to assert their power because of their financial muscles, you know. And also there's for instance, I would give an example. I was just also listening to a discussion, a documentary, where in Jacaranda grounds in Eastlands, men, converge and just have discussions about the issues of marriage. And one of the things that I was hearing is that a man would say, for you to get respect from a woman, you have to be violent, you know. So that is acceptable. It is normal. You know, there's this other person who would say, a few of them would oppose and say, that is not the right way to go, you know. There needs to be equality. So for me, my answer is, I mean, holistically in all aspects of our lives, be it political, economic, social, cultural, I mean, we have been structured, you know, in a way that actually provides those disparities of between men and women. And then we carry them with us. For instance, I would also say when you come to the judicial maybe decisions, you see, because of how people were raised, they make the same decisions despite having gone to school, you know.
True. Yeah, it's more or less of how we were, again, we have been brought up as a society in general. And of course, I'm happy that we have Viola Chepto Lagat, who is an athlete, to just give us a perspective really as far as, you know, violence, cases of violence, especially among athletes. So Viola, thank you very much for making time for us this morning. You are actively participating, that is as far as track and field is concerned. And I just want you to just lay it bare for us. When it comes to like athletes or the whole athletics world, what usually happens? Because we're seeing a number of cases as far as gender-based violence is concerned.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. We've seen a lot of cases rising with athletes specifically, and I think everyone was it was a shocker when that happened to Agnes. And a lot of athletes, when I ask them why this is happening, is because of jealousy. Somebody feels like an athlete is traveling and probably meeting someone somewhere who they shouldn't. And also some people get killed just because of their own money or their own sweat. So it's just unfortunate that this is happening.
What is like one of the major types of violence that probably has been experienced in, you know, the whole athletics world?
One of them is psychological, and then also the physical, and then the wealth, the explosion. So people are being exploited for their own wealth that they've accumulated through their own career. So we see that happening a lot. And we also hear about sexual assaults, things like that, and nobody really feels comfortable enough to talk about these things. So it's sad that athletes are not open enough to speak about these cases, that way they can get help.
Right. So then someone might ask, so then what usually happens, or what causes that? Because again, we see a lot of athletes, some of them who are very successful, and what might feel that they have, you know, somewhat of control about their money. They have, you know, control, let's say, over, let's say, their bodies and everything, right? But then we see a lot of cases, again, of violence still happening among athletes. So what usually happens, like, and how does it happen? Viola? All right, as we get Viola sorted out, let's speak to Sadat Abdullahi, who is a gender-based violence survivor. And Abdullahi, again, asante sana for coming by today. You are one of the survivors. Now, just take us back to what happened to you.
Good morning, everyone. Naitwa Sadat Abdullahi kutoka Kibra. Na mimi ni mmoja ama survivors during election 2007-2008 Kibra. From that day election kulikuwa na fracas tu ya kura, kila mtu anapigania anataka rais yake, president yake, nini na nini. So wakati ya vurugu zimekuwa, watu wakaingia kwa manyumba za watu, wakaanza kuvunja, wakaanza kuumiza watu, wakaanza kurep wasichana. Mimi nikiwa mmoja wapo ndani na my sister mkubwa, my elder sister, naenda alikuwa ananisimamia kila kitu, mahitaji yangu yote, kama ni shule, chakula, nyumba, nilikuwa chini yake. Watu wakaingia ndani na wakaanza kuvunja kila kitu, wakaanza kuvuruga. Na that time nilikuwa form 2, nilikuwa kijana mdogo sana, hata sikuwa na ID bado. Na from that time wameanza kuharass my elder sister, wakaanza kumpiga. Na after that wakaanza kumrape in front of me, mbele yangu. Na akajaribu kuresist, wakang'ang'ana naye, akadungwa kisu, akafuta kuona blood imetoka, ndo kwa mpole akarepiwa. Baada hapo kurepiwa, badala ya au watu watoke waende, wakaniona wakasema the same thing kenye imehappen kwako, kenye imehappen kwa your mom. Walikuwa nadhani huyu ni my mom, kumbe ni my sister. Wanataka kufanya kitu yenye kwa memory yangu haitaitoka kwa akili yangu. So nikaanza kulia, hakuna usaidizi ninakuja, hakuna mtu akutusaidia. So imebaki tu sasa, wakaanza na mimi, wakani rap, na kabla wani rap nimejaribu kuleta shida na wao. Wakanidunga kisu kwa mguu, niko na alama ya kisu hapa kwa mguu, ndio ikabidi nikuwe mpole. Nikajipata niko blackout, nimepoteza fahamu, ndo wakapata kuninajisi.
Pole sana, pole sana. Sadat, unaweza kukumbuka walikuwa watu wangapi, saa ngapi, kwa sababu unasema ilikuwa usiku?
Walikuwa namba ya watu kama walikuwa 9, na ilikuwa ni kitu kama, I think ni usiku, kitu kama saa 5 ikienda saa 6.
Pole sana. Alberta, and you see, it's just sad because now we're also headed towards the election period, and again, we don't know what's going to happen. All we pray for is that peace, and we'll have like a peaceful election. But even before that, and Annette, again, there's also a report that was released by KHRC. We'll also talk about that in just a moment. But Alberta, then how do we know, or what are some of the things that we can pick, like the telltale signs, and especially when it comes to a case of domestic violence? What are some of the signs that people need to be on the lookout for?
Okay, thank you, Winnie. So that before the telltale signs, yes, we're going to elections, and just as you said it, there are certain, would I say, patterns that we've noted as a country, and it hurts then when we keep knowing that, for example, there's electoral gender-based violence, and it happens most of the times we have elections. So it's something that we know. So it's working towards prevention. And yes, this time round, I believe there are a lot of institutions, key institutions and sectors are trying to prepare, and not just prepare, but also prevent the same, including the National Police Service, where we had a meeting, a really high-level meeting, just to try and see how do we work together, how do we prevent, and yes, Kenya Human Rights was there and shared the report. So telltale signs for all gender-based violence cases, it then goes back to, and knowing that this is how we are socialized, and this is the patriarchal society that we are in, is also then to try and prevent the same. And if that's how we are socialized, then the onus is on ourselves then to raise our kids differently and socialize them differently. The laws, the legislation Annette talked about is, and knowing, and she rightfully said so, that's how we are socialized. So even if I work at GVSC, you working here, Annette working at Kenya Human Rights, it's the same person, so you have that unconscious bias, and you tend to default, and things like that. So it's being deliberate and very conscious about it. And again, in whatever spaces we have, so for example, this is NTV, you're discussing gender-based violence. I mean, you discuss many other things. You wouldn't have supported the marathon tomorrow. So trying and really focusing on what are these priorities and how do we need to change these social norms, and in all these aspects that Annette talked about. And then again, when you go now to the telltale signs, there are cycles of violence. I mean, it's called the cycle of violence. And what can I tell you? At times I usually say that marriage, for example, is a gamble. I mean, there's someone who were raised in totally different cultures, and totally everything else so different. And I've seen, for example, a couple that lived so well, and the day they were having their 27th anniversary is when this woman was really thoroughly beaten and thrown down the steps and stabbed and all that. So control, it's one of the things where then you're not there as a partner, someone is really trying to control your space, and or now you're married, you shouldn't have friends, you shouldn't go home. So one of the things that happens is that you're cut off from
everything,
from people. People when you're takushanua, people where you'll be able to reach out for support, control. Just listening to the clip I was listening to in the morning, and they're talking about when the athletes when they win, and then the spouses take all the monies that they have and you know, and chase them and abuse them and things like that. So it's one of those telltale signs is those controls, being cut off from people. And earlier, one of the statements that you made, it cuts across economic status. You know, that's one thing I really want us to understand. You could be highly educated, you know, you could be highly financially stable, but you're seriously abused. I've met a woman who used to work in a very high agency, and 5 of her children were being defiled by their husband. The oldest had just turned 18. And she reached out, you know, the mom could not speak. She reached out and said, my kid's sister, she's now 4 years, you know, when we're changing her night diaper, we're finding blood, she's being abused. So it's not about the women not being bold. It's how then you're socialized and you're also not able to speak out. So the telltale signs, psychological, you know, you're always made to, sometimes you're belittled, you know, you're always made to feel that it's your fault. You know, I'm abusing you because it's your fault. It's your fault. I don't know whether I'm making sense. You know, so you start second guessing yourself. Am I not good enough? You know, am I not beautiful enough? Am I not cooking well? Am I not? So, and nothing justifies abuse. So I wouldn't say that wait for the telltale signs. Sometimes even when you're not even sure, just reach out for help. Just check, you know, because you're so brainwashed by the time you even realize that you're being abused, it's years down the line. When you try to get that support, for example, you find the support system might not be good enough, because then again, what we believe in, you know, you're taken care of, your kids are going to school, you must be the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah? So psychologically not happy, the cutoff we've talked about, for me that would be the psychological telltale signs that we need to reach out for help, and there's help. And does not mean that when you reach out for help you're less of a human being, but there are structures. I know, for example, the female athletes group are now reaching out and taking about it. So it starts with also those conversations. You know, I know they had, for example, a conference and they talked about it. So it starts with that speaking out and people knowing that there's a response system.
Towards the same. And you know, when it comes to like reporting and sometimes finding help, there's a lot of stigma that is associated with the same. And of course, we'll discuss that. And also the fact that you might actually go report and, you know, nothing is being done. A lot of people will say, I have reported this case, it's taken years later and still no justice, you know, that has been delivered. So then what happens in such a scenario? Of course, we'll be looking at that in just a moment. But let's speak to Viola, who's back with us. Viola, thank you for staying with us. So then when it comes to all these forms, because you talked about an aspect of where an athlete, and especially the female, might be, you know, exploited either sexually or for their wealth, or also, you know, psychological as well. And someone might ask again, so why is this happening? Like, why do we see this? Because a lot of people will say, but again, athletes have somewhat of control, I would say, over their life and success and the wealth that probably they are amassing. So then why is it that, or how do we see cases of, you know, violence among athletes, especially female athletes?
I think for most of women, they feel ashamed to leave those relationships because athletes were being held at a high level of, you know, everybody looks at us as perfect people. Our lives are so perfect. We have the money, we have control of our lives, basically. So a lot of them are afraid to come out because they feel that, you know, they look like they're failing. And also, they feel like also if they walk away and they're married to the people who are abusing them, they might lose everything because they've worked so hard for what they have. Then walking away is not an option now, so they might as well stay. And then there are also cases where I've had some athletes say, you know, I reported this to the police. Somebody was in police custody for a day, and then the next day he's bailing out. So why should I keep reporting it? Because, you know, this person will be back home and doing the exact same thing that happened the other night. So it's just a failure from all of us, especially also the community. We have a tendency of shaming the victims instead of supporting them. So also some of the women tell me, you know, I told my friend, and the next day I heard it from everybody else, and everybody thinks I'm the one on the wrong, instead of, you know, looking at what I'm going through. So it's a lot of things that makes athletes stay, and why this continues happening.
And it's just sad because, again, like you said, a lot of people look at athletes and thinking these are role models. Nothing is supposed to be wrong, you know, when it comes to life and everything like that. So it puts a lot of pressure, I would say, on athletes to just, you know, put this up as far as making people think that everything is perfect, but it's not. So many people are actually dying inside. So then, as far as then Agnes Tirop's case, which again, you know, shone a lot of light as far as gender-based violence is concerned, and cases of gender-based violence is concerned, especially among athletes. What are some of the lessons that you would say we can learn from Tirop's case? And then, of course, we'll also talk about the cross-country tour that is being organized tomorrow.
The biggest lesson that we learned really is
Okay, all right. We seem to have a little bit of issues with Tirop's connection, but we really, really hope that she can come back so that we can, you know, highlight very briefly on what will be happening tomorrow. And this is as far as Agnes Tirop World Cross Country Tour, which is being organized tomorrow, and it will be happening tomorrow in Iten. And of course, a number of races, like I said earlier on, including a 10-kilometer senior men and women's race will be happening. So we hope that Viola will come back. But for now, Annette, let's talk to you in terms of how widespread is cases of violence, and especially when it comes to domestic violence. How widespread is it in the country?
I would say in terms of being widespread, it is. I mean, and I know COVID happened, and many people are learning about GBV during COVID, but this has been with us, you know. I call it the silent pandemic because, again, as she says, few people would want to talk about GBV because they'll be shamed because of how we are socialized. You know, so it's widely spread, but the issue then is the reporting. Because that cuts across so many issues that then would have impact on whether somebody would want to report the cases or not. So in short, it is, and then it's widely spread actually, both at the national, in the public sphere and in the private sphere. You know, and most of the times we've centered GBV on in the private sphere, but in the public it's happening. For instance, we are going to be talking about the elections. You know, this is the time we are going to see when political rights are being violated, mostly women in the public sphere. So it is widespread, it's cutting across, and the issue then is that so many cases are not reported, and because of that, it's not the issue is not highlighted.
All right.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, it's just calling upon relevant authorities and even institutions, including media. You see, for instance, many people looked at GBV and thought this is, I mean, a critical issue because Tirop perhaps was murdered.
Yes.
But how many
Before
women?
Then there were so many cases
that are not reported, you know, and not highlighted in the public.
And then when it comes to data, I think there's a very, very big problem, especially when it comes to data, because whatever is available, I think the last time it was conducted was when 2014. That is when we saw, you know, the data as far as cases of gender-based violence in the country. Up until now, do we have like an updated data really?
No, I wouldn't say that there is data updated. I mean, really, because again, as I've said, it all boils down to the reporting, you know. And for me, again, when we talk about data, I'll also be looking at the issue of disjointed efforts by relevant authorities. We have the National Police, for example. We have even the civil society that has recorded so many cases, you know. But then how do we ensure that there's a centralized place that we all input, you know, so that at the end of the day, we are able to have statistics that we can rely on as a country and also be able to just take relevant measures based on the same.
Exactly. All right. And of course, again, when you say it is, a lot of people don't report, probably there's someone who's like, but I reported, but nothing was done really. Or when you go to report, the questions that you get in return, sometimes it's just like, no, I'd rather not. So again, would look at some of the aspects as to why then people are not reporting cases of gender-based violence and what needs to be done to make sure that we change the narrative. Like we said, from the way we're socialized to also what needs to be done to offer support, especially to the survivors. And we'll also look at what KHRC is doing as far as that is concerned. But let's speak to Sadat. So Sadat, umesema ulipoteza fahamu. But vile uliamka nini unaweza kumbuka?
Vile nilipoteza fahamu, kwenda kuamuka nikajipata niko hospitali. nikiwa natibiwa nikiongezewa damu, hapo ndo fahamu yangu nilipata fahamu hapo. Nikiwa naongezewa maji.
Okay. So ulikuwa hospitalini muda gani? Dada yako ulijua kule alikuwa at that time?
Hospitali nilikuwa for 3 months. Nilikuwa hospitali 3 months na venye nilikuwa niko hospitali nikakuja nikapata ripoti kwamba kwa wenye walikuwa wanakuja kunitembelea hospitali wakaniletea ujumbe kwamba my sister amepass kama niko hospitali, na the worst thing kenye imefanya tu mpaka saizi nakumbuka sijamwona my sister wakati hata akikufa, juu sisi kama Muslims kabla ziko tunawekewa open tomb amwone ya mwisho, amuombea ya mwisho. Sasa mimi sijamwona, na to make the matter worse kenye imefanya mpaka nika lose my sister just because of elections. Na that elections ndio around the corner inakam, so nikiwa naona election ndio bado challenge inakam kwangu, na I'm scared of myself because naogopa hiyo kitu isije ikafanyike tena. Imenifanyikia kwangu, kesha tujitafanyikia kwa nani? So ningependa watu kama serikali ama wenye wako na uwezo waangalie hiyo gender based violence, angalau waone venye wanaweza ipunguza, cause inakuwa happen kila siku na kila saa. Na sasa report haifiki kwa serikali, inafika report but wanakuwa kipuuza. So ningependa serikali ingie kati kwa hiyo story.
Yeah, and of course, like Alberta said, we need to make sure that we prevent the onset of the same, so that again, people like Sadat do not live in fear basing on what happened to him. That is in 2007-2008 elections. And of course, what we're seeing now, I'd want Annette and Alberta to react to this after we come back from the break, and that is what we're seeing now in terms of like the political intolerance. There's a lot of going back and forth, insults going on. So again, it puts the country as a very, not a really good place as far as preparing for the elections is concerned. So what do we need to do on the same? But remember that tomorrow, that is on Saturday 12th February 2022, there is an Agnes Tirop World Cross Country Tour that has been organized. And of course, we have like over 400 athletes who have confirmed their participation. And that is in the inaugural Agnes Tirop World Cross Country Tour, which has been slated again for Saturday in Lobo Village, Eldoret Town. And amongst some of the athletes who will be participating includes Helen Obiri, who will be actually taking it out against Ruth Chepngetich. And remember that cross country or World Cross Country Tour is being slated for 12th of February 2022. Take a look at this promo, and then of course we're taking a break. When we come back, we'll still talk about cases of gender-based violence and what needs to be done to make sure that we stop or we prevent cases of gender-based violence. Take a look at this. All right, welcome back. Glad you're still with us. Remember, the show is Your World, and today we are shedding a special light, and this is as far as gender-based violence is concerned. And of course, like we said, this is in honor of what will be happening tomorrow, and that is the memorial Agnes Tirop World Cross Country Tour, which will actually be live right here on NTV. And of course, a number of races have been slated, including the 10-kilometer senior men and women race. And of course, a number of international athletes have also been invited, and over 400 athletes have actually confirmed their participation. And to get more on the same, let's speak to Viola Cheptolagat, who is an athlete and of course also involved in the planning and organizing of this cross-country tour. So Viola, just take us through how important, first of all, and why the need to actually put up this World Cross-Country Tour in honor of Agnes Tirop.
It's such a, I think it's a bittersweet moment for us because we get to remember our sister Agnes for who she was, for the strong woman that she was. I would say that she was a strong woman because you couldn't tell, there was no sign that she was going through this, but she would still continue to shine and inspire a lot of people. So I'm really, really happy that World Athletics remembered about how much she contributed to the whole world, and especially to athletics fraternity, to just have her name there on that race tomorrow. So for us, we when Agnes Tirop passed, a few athletes and I joined hands, and we decided, we want to take the first action and start a foundation that will bring light to gender-based violence and end it completely. So we're really happy that we've been involved in the planning for the event tomorrow. The foundation is called Tirop's Angels, So tomorrow we will be involved in sensitization and just remembering our sister, and also, reminding ourselves why we're there tomorrow. We're there because Agnes Tirop passed in a very brutal way. It was through gender-based violence. So that is basically what the race is about, to remind us and to just honor Agnes.
All right. And of course, it's also a special race because her family is also involved in the organizing of the same.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, we have Tirop's dad and the brother have been very much involved because they're also part of the trust. So we've been involved in planning on what to do, where to, everything that will be happening tomorrow. So it's really nice that they've been incorporated in the planning.
Okay. So then what do you have to achieve, like by the end of the race? And even before we talk about what you hope to achieve by the end of the race, can you just take us through what will be happening? What should people expect during the races tomorrow? Because I understand there are a couple of races.
Yes, there will be a couple races that will just be done like the normal cross-country event or World Athletic event. But this time around, I heard that the women's event will be the last one. That way, it's usually the men's event that goes last. But we've been told that the females race, the 10,000, is going to be the last one, just in honor of Agnes, because, we want to shine light to who she was and the event that she really loved. So we're looking forward to seeing everybody coming together to celebrate that last event, especially the women's 10,000. And we expect to have some cases who will be speaking out about gender-based violence. Also, we will have the Tirop's Angels shedding light to the same issue on gender-based violence.
All right. And then, so after the race, again, like you said, it's more of shedding light about gender-based violence. Of course, that will be talked about. And also the fact that the women's race would be the last one, which I think is such an honor, especially to honor Agnes Tirop as well. But then again, after the race, what more do you think needs to be done? And especially when it comes to the female athletes who are facing cases of gender-based violence, what more do you feel needs to be done to make sure that then we put an end to some of those things?
The first will be really educating, especially the female athletes, on what gender-based violence is. Myself, I couldn't even term it as gender-based violence until this happened to Agnes, or when I got really exposed to what gender violence is from just hearing stories or remembering what had happened to some of my family members. So I know a lot of people don't term it as gender-based violence until somebody else reminds them. So I think the first thing that we will do is just defining what gender-based violence is. We plan on visiting schools, especially high schools. That way, because we know at this point they understand what it is, and we can define that and tell them what to do when you've been a victim of gender-based violence. So basically, a lot of education will have to happen after this, and Tirop's Angels is going to take that action as soon as possible, because we as a community should take responsibility in ensuring that this doesn't happen to anyone else. So really first is educating, and then the second one is just supporting the victims. We have to be able to support the victims, because if we don't support them, they'll just stay in the same situation and not feel comfortable enough to speak about what they're going through.
And what kind of support, very briefly, what kind of support do you foresee or do you wish that could be given to the victims, so that, number one, the survivors either come out and talk about it, or even spread more awareness as far as gender-based violence is concerned?
I think for every victim, the first thing is just to have somebody to hear you. So we are going to create a hotline where they would be calling and they would speak to someone about what they're going through. That way they can get the help. And we have a long-term plan of securing safe houses for our victims in case something happens to them and they don't feel comfortable to wait until at the next minute to just speak to somebody. They can run to that place. We'll just have a hotline, call and say I need to live here as soon as possible. So we'll have safe places for them to go. And then some other help support that we will offer them will be, let's say, if they need legal support, if they need medical support, especially psychological, because as victims of gender-based violence, we know the number one thing is the psychological. A lot of them say that I couldn't get out of it because it was normal for me. So that's how somebody have been affected psychologically. So we will need to support them that way.
Thank you very much, Viola, for that. And of course, all the best tomorrow during the race. Will you be participating as well? Will you be on the field?
I won't be running because I'm just preparing for a marathon right now. I would have ran, but I arrived in Kenya late. I was in the U.S. for quite some time. And so I just thought, I'm just going to be there to support everybody that is competing, especially my sisters. And everybody, I just love running. I love cross country, so I can't miss it, especially that it's been brought here in Eldoret, our own city where we love athletics so much. So I can't miss it. I'll be there. I'll be the first person there. So, yeah, you'll expect to see me there.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Violet. Of course, all the best even in your training as you prepare for marathon. So we have to let you go so that you can go prepare for marathon and even put last minute finishes as far as then the memorial that is Agnes Tirop World Cross Country Tour, which will be live right here on NTV. And of course, it will be taking place in Eldoret. Thank you very much, Viola. Really, really appreciate your time this morning. All right, and of course, let's speak to Elizabeth, who is joining us via phone this morning to just give us, a bit of what really happened to her, because what we understand is that she went through physical and emotional violence as well. So Elizabeth is not her real name because we need to also protect her. So Elizabeth, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. Could you briefly tell us exactly when, cases of when you started experiencing cases of physical and emotional abuse as well, and who was the perpetrator?
Okay, thank you so much. It took me 34 years to realize that I was in a toxic relationship. For I was married by then, for all those years. It was all about emotional abuse. It was all about control of even the finances, control of everything. I could not do everything on my own. To me, I thought it was all about love. Only to discover that it wasn't love much later. But in both cases, I remember there was a time we were to have some participation in the church, share about our life. And I remembered we were to be given some time to talk. I was to write about my love, my life, how we met, how we came to get married. But it never dawned me because I remembered we were about two couples sharing about all that. And as I wrote my story, how I was I never knew marriage is all about this because I was married, dumped there in the village. I could not do anything. I thought marriage was something that you could even share your dreams with somebody else. With whoever has married you. And when I wrote all that, I was sharing now with the other couple, the way now you rehearse about how you're going to do it. And he was like, no, don't do that. Don't. And I was wondering, what is wrong with that? Until the other couple said, it's no, it is her story. Don't just tell her not to do that. So besides that, there was so much that came into that. And from there, it's where nowadays when I reflect back, I say it was all about, controlling me in anything that I would do, even what I would say, even the friends I would keep. Now coming back now to the reality when now everything hit the bottom, or maybe I hit the rock, was sometimes last year after when he had abandoned me for so many years with the children. My children dropped from school. My children deferred from the university. They had already reached that level. When I said no to everything. And I remembered now, yes, before then the physical abuse was there. And I remembered one time, it was in the morning, and he was telling me something about, it was all about he wanted to leave job. And then we relocated in the village, and then I said no. So my saying no and standing for the no, I tell you, I was beaten to an extent whereby I had to the way it's you get into the wardrobe, so that at least the beating could stop. Much later after all that, I remembered I asked him. And then for him, he was just bold enough to tell me that he can't take a no from me. Still by then, it never dawned on me. So anyway, all in all, I went into depression. I'm even right now with hypertension. It took me all that until sometimes last year, you know, with COVID, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a tailor, and I didn't have money. I had arrears. It had cruded so much, almost 60,000 for the rent. And something came into me, and then I said, now, why don't I just tell him? Because after all, we were told that he was supposed to co-parent with me, to help me. I have my children here. They can't go to school. I can't raise even money for food. You know, I didn't have anything. So when I went, only to my surprise, I discovered this man had already married. He's with another woman with 3 children who are not even his children. And with all that, when he saw me, you see, like, now what have you come to do here? The beating started again. I tell you, my sweetheart, I was so beaten. I was so beaten to an extent whereby he broke my glasses because I wear glasses. Luckily enough, or unfortunately, I was there with my daughter because it was like now the house was locked. We could not do anything. And then my daughter told me, let's go to daddy. Maybe he can see how serious it is. This is where it is. Until it was that woman who told him, no, you can't beat your wife like this in front of me. The neighbor said to come and intervene. Anyway, to cut the long story short, people calmed him down. He stopped it at that. Then it was like he was to replace my glasses. Meanwhile, as I was waiting, the worst even came, whereby at night now it is like, where do I sleep? Because the house is just a 2-bedroom house. He did the worst thing of it, that you find he would sleep with this woman and yet I'm there, and he would not lock the bedroom. It broke me into pieces. I told myself, and I asked myself, and I asked God, why am I going through all this? How could somebody do such an insensitive thing to me? That is how I left the place. And I remembered from there, I said, God, I will never. And that is all what it takes for me to be what I am today. Emotionally, I grew strong after that. And I remembered when I was leaving, I told him, you'll never get a woman as me ever in your life. So I left the place, yes. Finally, at his place of work, I was given some glasses because he had to take me there. I could not see anything. I had to report to the doctor there, and he was called. He said he doesn't want to see me. He doesn't want me, and he did that to show me that he has moved on with his life.
Okay.
So that is how I came now to Nairobi Women, again, because my condition was worse, especially with my blood pressure. The GVRC took me up. I was treated again from there. And that is how it went for me until what I am today. Okay.
All right. I'll come back to you, Elizabeth, in terms of then, because like you said, married another woman in the same house. And at what point did you report, and you know what kind of response did you get after reporting? But Annette and I think Alberta, so listening to such stories, it's just sad because now in this day and age, people still get to that point of, you know, being beaten, being emotionally abused, being told you can never say no, you know, to me. So then what happens, especially when it comes to, you know, the human rights perspective? Because Elizabeth said, I did not know that this was not normal. I thought this is just normal, you know, where this is all love. This person loves me so much. They want to take care of me and do everything. But really, it wasn't. It was some form of, you know, emotional abuse. You want to take that, Annette?
Okay, thanks. So it's regarding where somebody comes to understand where their rights come in. Yeah. And again, as I say, this is a gray area. Some of us maybe have been in this space and can relate and understand what our rights are, but it's not common to everybody. Yeah. And I'll again maintain the issue of socialization, you know, where you feel like once I come out and say I'm being abused, then I'll be labeled perhaps, then I'll be discriminated upon, you know. But if there is awareness, general awareness by every individual, be it a child, be it a girl, be it a boy, be it a woman, be it a man, whatever they are, irrespective of their class, ethnicity, and all that. When we all understand that GBV is a human right, then it all begins there. Because, for instance, we have a very progressive policy and legal framework on matters SGBV. You go to our constitution, it begins under Article 10, for instance, which also provides that for the principles and the national and principles of governance. It provides for human rights, human dignity, inclusiveness, you know, non-discrimination, equality, you know, all that. We go to Article 26, a right to life, 27, freedoms, you know, and equality and freedoms from discrimination, where it says that both men and women should be equal, you know, and also in terms of opportunities, you should not be discriminated because of your gender, you know, human dignity, 28, Article 28. So all that, you know, and as I said again, it's not common to everybody. So we should all start understanding this, and I know as a society, it's very broad. And when I talk about, for instance, the human rights, and I know the first question that was asked here, whose responsibility is it? I would want to say it's the responsibility of the whole society. Okay. All of us have a responsibility as a society, as a community, for instance. We should understand that it is right, it's right for somebody to say they're not okay. You know, they should not be stigmatized because of that. As the government, for instance, we have a responsibility of protecting, you know, the responsibility to respect, to uphold, you know, the human rights and fundamental freedom. So when all the government entities perhaps take their responsibility, it all begins there. Yeah. When the schools, for instance, we teach our children, they are taught on their human rights and understanding that GBV is a violation of human rights. It all begins there. So, I mean, I would want to just say it's a responsibility of the society, and all of us are called upon to just ensure that we eliminate sexual gender-based violence.
Yes, and just violence really in general, doesn't matter what. But then again, I have heard a lot of people and a lot of discussions around, you know, when we bring in aspects of human rights, there's some people who are like, when you start talking about human rights, it's more of creating a weakened society, because go back to like our great-great-grandfathers and our grandmothers, and you know, most of them, some of them were beaten, and they never cried about, oh, I know my rights, or oh, this is a human rights violation. I don't know if you've had that, where people say, no, this is like creating a weakened society where people cannot accept how we were raised or how we were cultured as Africans. It's more of we're copying what the Western is doing, really, but that's not the case, right?
It's not the case, because when it comes to someone's life and people losing their lives, really we cannot say that it's copying the Western culture. I mean, those were barbaric, whatever, cultures in the olden days. I mean, in this age, honestly, we cannot sit here and say that we are copying cultures when people are being murdered left, right, and center. It is a violation of a right, and I mean, we should just really forget about these issues of telling us that we have cultures in place that really are violating our rights, and we should keep quiet about it.
Yeah. We should speak
about it. We all have
it.
rights to life.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. So, even the young children, even the smallest of a child, everybody has a right. And Alberta, you know what, most of the time when we talk about rights and we talk about cases of speaking up, and especially cases of domestic violence, a lot of people will say, but we were in love. We loved each other when we got together, but I don't know what happened that this person changed, right? So then the question is, where does this thing stem from? Is it money? Is it, you know, like, where does this stem from? That someone that probably you loved and loved you back, in turn, you know, turns against you and becomes something else, and even sometimes takes your life.
That's a hard one, but I think it just stems from bad people. Again, back to socialization, and this is someone who was raised, and as you said, saw their father behaving that way towards their mother. And again, answering part of what Annette was also talking about is that why don't we, or why don't, you know, the people who are being abused speak up? Is because then you saw that's how the woman is treated. So again, you grow that way. Why do people change? I really also don't understand. But I think they're also contributing factors. And I was just checking one of the tweets, and it's wrong. But there are people who tend to, and those are excuses. Someone who will tell you, oh yeah, alcohol, I was drunk. When again, when you go back to the cycle of violence, ilikuwa shetani and things like that. Someone at the tweet was talking about life pressures, you know, the expectations you expect of men and the pressure that we have,
comes
and
along with
mental wellness issues and mental health issues and all the pressure that's happening. So people use whatever excuses, economic issues, we've been having COVID, it's been tough for me, you don't understand, things like that. And when I look at some of the case studies that we receive at GVRC and listen to the experiences of survivors, you'd find someone saying, nilikuwa nachemsha maji ugali, I was boiling water to cook ugali, and then I asked money for unga, I asked money to take the child to hospital, and he just took the water and poured on me. So, but those are not the real issues. So it goes back to not just data, but programming that's evidence-based. So exactly what is it? So earlier when you're talking about culture, not all culture is bad. It's just the harmful, you know, bits of it, the practices that are wrong. But when I look back, for example, when maybe when we were younger, you'd get advice, for example, before you're married. Someone would sit you down, there'd be support, there'd be, this is, you know, these are the roles, this is what, there'll be a conversation. But now, predators are ticking the checkbox. Yeah, you do it like 2 sessions with the priest or whatever, you know, and it's just really a formality, and here we are getting married, don't know each other. So there are different reasons that would contribute, but the more important is to have, if it's done in a marriage institution, to have the proper support, proper conversations before talk about the real issues. A lot of us don't talk about, for example, our religious beliefs. We don't, at that point when we're in love, we don't have the real conversations. You know someone's second name. I guess that's also where the problem starts, or how are we going to raise our kids, or what are these financial issues? Do we have a common goal? And I had a deep discussion with someone, and I was telling them how even at marriage, even you as a person, you don't lose yourself as an individual.
No, because you're married.
Exactly. And second is, my needs when I was in my 20s and 30s, and now you know my age, are very different as a woman. And whether it's career, whether it's, you know, whatever space it is, I'll raise my kids, what women even have this triple role, you know, I have to be a mother, think of what people will eat, I have to perform at work, I have to be the best wife, I have to. So we never tend to sit and have these open discussions and see then how do we support, do we have a common goal and things like that. So I guess people are not ready to, marriage is hard work. And it's hard work.
You have to work every day, every day.
So I guess those are also the bits that we lose it. And then again, back to support system. You go home, alinifanya, alinichapa, alikuwa, we ndio hata si tulishi hivyo, we ndio shida, go back. So, you know, the victim blaming and also the support, you talked about the co-ops, you talked about the support system. Viola was talking about the safe houses now. You can imagine we don't have enough. We really got exposed around the COVID period because we had lots of gender-based violence cases.
During the same,
so it's a whole systemic thing. It's not just one aspect, but it's everything that needs to fit to each other. A lot of conversations today we've had about prevention, the women, the what. We also have to have conversations with the men, for example.
As well. Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that we have Sadat. And Sadat, so ukiwa hospitali, ukakaa hospitalini for 3 months. After ulitoka hospitalini, hata kabla uende hospitalini, ulijua kwanza ni akina nani hawa waliwavamia wakakuja kwa nyumba yako na sister yako? Mko mnawajua?
Ni watu wenye wanajulika, nilikuwa nawajua, na ni watu wenye tunajuana na wao.
Okay, all right. So after umetoka hospitalini, ulienda ukaripoti what happened to you and your sister, ama uliachia tu hapo?
Yes, kiasi kama hiyo venye nimetoka hospitali, nilijipea muda kidogo, na nilikuwa na mentor mwenye alikuwa anatembea kuja kuniona, sikuwa peke yangu, nilikuwa na watu walikuwa wanakuja kunitembelea. Na wakati nilikuwa nawaeleza kila kitu nini na nini, hawa wakanichukua mimi mwenyewe pamoja na wao, tukaenda kuandika ripoti kwa maaskari, angalau tuone venye tunaweza saidika nipate justice. Nakumbuka sana wakati tukiwa tumeenda kuripoti hapo kwa OB, tukapata wahudumu maskari hapo, wakaanza after tumewaeleza venye tunataka, wakaanza kutuchekelea, wakaanza kunicheka, wakaanza kuongea matamshi zingine si za kunifurahisha na si za kufurahisha wale wenzangu wenye nilikuja na wao. So imekuwa badala ya kutusaidia imekuwa ni kicheko, na huku nimekuwa nikiumia, na mawalisa ninakuwa kitamka wakasema ulisikia aje, that the word enye wameniambia vile mimi nilisikia na ni maskari nilisikia aje. Na the second word waliniambia tuadbili, sasa wakaniambia sasa wewe ni msichana, sasa tuko busy, utakuja baadaye. That's the thing yenye nakumbuka kenye tuliambiwa sisi. Right.
So wow, so ukisikiza haya maneno nini nilikuja kwa akili yako, like unasikia kabisa vile wanakwambia hivi na yet wewe umekuja kuripoti ya kwamba this is what happened to you na unataka usaidizi?
Yeah, that thing imekuwa ikinumiza sana roho, na wakati nikarudi nyumbani sasa sikuwa naweza kutembea tena kurudi tena police station kuandika statement tena ama kupata usaidizi. Wenye walikuwa wanakuja ni wenye walikuwa wananitembelea, Good Samaritan, wenye walikuwa wananisaidia wakiniletea vitu za kutumia. Sasa wao ndio walikuwa wanajaribu kushikilia hiyo kesi, kuifuatilia, but imeshindikana mpaka leo. Hakuna kitu yote imefanyika.
I'm so sorry, Sadat. And let's speak to Elizabeth as well, and then I'll have you, Annette, respond to this, cases of reporting, and then you see whatever you get in return is not really, really helpful. So, Elizabeth, again, did you report your case?
Okay, I did report my case, but I was given the letter. But I took it that just as I remembered, I've just heard from how the other victim was done. Those cases, I just had such kind of a thing, and I said, I want just to build this on myself. But I had the letter, I showed the doctor, I showed even him that I've already gotten a letter from Nairobi Women from the GVRC Center that in case of anything, because it's like I also want to put a stop for this. And with that, I went on, I joined the support group, and it has helped me emotionally to be what it is. Yes, physically I got ill after getting the medication. And that is how I have built myself up till to date.
Okay, that is through the support group, but you never reported this to the police?
Yes, I never reported to the police.
May I ask why?
One, I don't know whether maybe it was just a myth, because I've heard of so many cases of maybe you report, there is nothing the police are going to do. And then also I think I was still in that cocoon of putting it. It's like, how are the society going to take me up? Because I was still not yet myself by that particular time. So it was just all about the fear that I had.
All right. So then what kind of support did you get from the support group that you were assigned to that, like you said, has helped you to, build yourself up and become who you are today? And again, did you probably forgive the perpetrator? Are you back with the perpetrator? Or what happened?
From the support group, I really got emotionally healed. Because to make it better or make it I like when I was called to join the support group, I went there. To me, my mind was like, I want to be with people. I want to hear more from other people. I want to see how can I be helped. I want to see how has somebody else managed their cases so that at least I can also get myself help. So emotionally, I got it, and even from the doctors who are taking us through, I remember they would talk to us how to be strong with ourselves, self-care about ourselves, mentally what we need to do. And then another thing, I remember that one time we had an empowerment program that we were taught about skills of even now to get how you can venture into business, and especially the online businesses that we did for about 6 weeks. And it helped me with even the rest that we were there, that at least we see that other than, because you see, from there I remembered I was like, now I need to get that emotionally healed. I need also to get that financial support, or maybe financially I had to be stable. And then physically I had also to do that. So with that, you find now, and then also the spiritual aspect of it, which I remembered through help of the church where I go. And also you find from the support of the friends, I really got healed. And it's like, this is all that it's like God is showing me also He loves me, and it was a walk of faith and trust in God that everything is going to be okay. Because just hearing even from others, I remember I took it to myself that it's not, I'm not the first one and I'm not going to be the last one. And that one also gave me that inner drive to make sure that at least let nobody else, let not any other woman also suffer maybe the way I've suffered. Just to make sure that I become strong, at least I can give a testimony that from there I became what I am today. And I've done that because I remembered even like now with the professor now, that is my ex, I can call him so. I said no still to everything, and the recent one that happened, he lost his mother, and I heard the news. I was told about it, and I said I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go because one, it's like I go there now as who. Two, I also feel feared for myself because I don't know what he can do to me, because bearing in mind that now I'm still standing on my no, I don't know whatever the effect. Culturally, it didn't augur well because I remembered even one of I've just spoke about it, about the culture, when that now you find the society, they don't want to support you, but I still remained because my family was like, no, you must go for the burial of world. I said, I'm not going there, and I'm not going there, and I said, even if you want to disown me, I'm not going to go there.
Okay.
So from there, I remembered even they called me there, and I said, no, I'm not going to be going there. So that is how so far I'm still standing on my no, so that at least this violence can stop. That abusiveness that you find somebody just take you for granted simply because it's like you are married, and that is all what it takes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, first of all, for just sharing your story with us today, and just shedding light on what, usually happens and how difficult it can be, and especially for people to just report because of the stigma that comes with it. And thank you as well. It's really good to hear that you worked on yourself and you are at a very, very good place right now. So all the best, even as you continue to just being strong and building yourself up, and encouraging other women out there to keep standing on their ground, I would say, and just taking care of themselves as well. So thank you very much, Elizabeth. And we're taking a short break right now, but of course when we come back, we have your feedback as far as the question that we're asking you, and that is who should be held accountable, on the rising cases of gender-based violence in the country. Now that we're heading into an electioneering period, what do we need to do to make sure that we have a peaceful elections? And of course, for those ones who really, really suffered, especially when it comes to like 2007, 2008, post-election violence again, what needs to be done to make sure that we do not experience a repeat of the same. So let's take a break, but of course, when we come back, still have a lot to discuss as far as gender-based violence is concerned. Stay with us. Right, thank you very much for staying with us. This is Your World, and the conversation is on gender-based violence. And of course, remember, we're asking you who should be held accountable for the rising cases of gender-based violence cases in the country. So feel free to interact with us. Keep tweeting at NTV Kenya, at Lubembe_Winnie. You can see a number of your tweets. We'll be looking at them in just a moment. But right about now, we are joined by Mark. That is not his real name, as well, to just share his story with us. So Mark, thank you very much for making the call this morning. And one of the things that actually took you to hospital is the fact that one day you had a quarrel with your wife because she thought that you were cheating on her. Do you want to take us through that day?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, yes. My case is an issue of my partner going through my phone, then keeping the evidence to herself that, hey, you're sitting, you're conversing to so and so. Basically, in my career, I'm a salesman. I talk to so many people across the board. So I asked her, what is the evidence that you have against me? Can you give me a chance to explain? So the issue was, over the time, she held a lot of grudges and bitterness towards me because she was so sure I'm cheating on her. So one day I tried to have a sitting with iron our issues out, but she turned violent on me, and that was not the first time. She took, there were some intentions for the table, you're having breakfast, she hit me on the face. I was injured, though it wasn't that serious, but I was really taken back because she didn't give me room to explain myself.
Okay. Yes. So was this like the first time something like this happened in terms of like physical violence happened, or were there some of the signs before this day?
Before, that was not the first time. Before, she has been having this loud outburst, abusing me in front of the kids, threatening me with a knife, challenging me for a fight and such. I've always kept my distance because I know I'm a man. If I'm to fight a woman, it will be a bad picture, and she's the mother of my kids. I've always played the cool guy in the relationship, but so many times she has been threatening me. In fact, that day when she hit me, I took a step to go to the police, take a P3 against her, because I wanted her to know you cannot always have your way. If it's wrong to threaten someone, it's wrong to hit someone. Yeah, so she has threatened me before, verbally, and also physically.
Okay.
Even tearing my shirt out, my t-shirts out when you're fighting, holding me tight, that kind of thing. Ripping my chain off and such.
All right. So when you went to report to the police, did you get the assistance that you needed at that time?
The police were very, very cooperative. They were very lenient. Like, they had my side of the story. Also, they had hers. But because I was the first complainant and the physical injury that was seen, so I was allowed to file for the P3. Yes.
All right.
Very helpful.
Okay. And then you went to the hospital. How long did it take for you to recover?
It was a soft injury tissue on my upper lip. So within a week, I was okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Did the situation change at home?
I kept away for a while, like 3 days. Then I went back. I moved out of our main from the main room to a crash on the porch for a while. And then over time, we were like, we're not talking to each other. Then with time, I was like, anyway, because I've a senior boy, a candidate doing his class A, sitting for his exams. I thought maybe I need to make this here for the sake of my kid, so that he can have some ample time to study. Because now, cold in the house, at the end of the day, the kids are the ones who are going to suffer. So I talked to one of the aunties. They came, we had a sitting. I told her, going forward, you cannot learn to talk to each other. Communication. You need to iron issues out. You don't need to carry grudges over and over and over and over. Because also me, I was very bitter. Yes. So we made this for the sake of myself.
Of the children. All right. Thank you very much, Mark, for sharing your story with us this morning. And Annette, can you just take a case? Again, based on what Sadat shared, and this is as far as reporting, you got to report, and then the kind of response that you get is not really good. If anything, you're being stigmatized. So in terms of then structures, as far as the law and law enforcers, when it comes to reporting such cases, what do you think needs to be done to just make sure that everybody gets a right of someone to just hear them out and get the help that they really, really need?
Thanks. I think for me, I would summarize this in 4 ways. Number 1, the protection. And when you talk about the protection, for instance, and as you know, that there are so many institutions that play a significant role when it comes to matters gender-based violence. We have the ODPP, we have the police, we have the National Gender and Equality Commission, we have the Kenya National Human Rights Commission. There are so many. So in summarizing them into four, for instance, when we talk about protection, it's upon the government to ensure that maybe there is comprehensive care centers. So by that, we are protecting these people, because we've seen in most instances that most of the survivors do not get away from their perpetrators because perhaps they depend on them. And so when I leave, where am I going to? And as my colleague said, the support system, perhaps you want to go back to your home, but then you are not allowed to. Yeah. So the government then needs to protect. Right now we have about 42 safe houses. You know, 36 of those are owned privately, and then government only 6. You know, so a lot needs to be done. You know, I mean the GBV cases are on the rise, really outnumbering the centers that are available. When you talk about maybe prevention, and it all starts there. There's prevention as well, then there's investigation, and then reparation. Because again, when we talk about ending gender-based violence, I mean, it should be a holistic approach, and that's why I talk about the four issues that should be looked at as resolutions. And I would want to go back and touch on to the journey, perhaps, of accessing justice, which is really a major setback in terms of ending gender-based violence in this country, because most of the times, and as Sadat says, he went and reported to the police, but what did he get? You know, but I'm happy to also hear that there's one who reported, perhaps, and there are few who've reported and they've gotten support. So this boils down to the issue of capacity. You know, police have been trained, but then we see often we see deployment and redeployment of these police persons who've been trained maybe on how to handle GBV issues. So again, that leaves a void. And so people are not able maybe to get that support. And then the issue is also sensitive. We realize, like, there are people who go to report, then you find interns on the gender desk, you know. So how are you supposed to share with people without capacity to support you? It becomes very difficult. But at the same time, we also have generally police persons without this capacity. And as we were talking about the issue of patriarchy and socialization, he went and asked for help. You know, I've come to record a statement, and you're being told, how did you feel? You know, that is so insensitive. Yeah, at the same time, then this person will tell you, you are a man, why do you come and report private issues in the public? You get it? So because of these experiences that then survivors share out there, they stop the other survivors to also be able to maybe follow the channels that are in place to access justice. But there's also a major, one of the issues that I would want to highlight, the burden of proof. You know, the witness statements that survivors are being asked. I mean, in his case, for instance, he blacked out. He found himself in hospital. He was out of hospital after 3 months. How is he supposed to generate evidence to support his case to proceed, you know? But that is how our legal system is structured, you know. So because of that, it becomes very difficult for any person, any survivor who would want to access a justice, you know. But again, as I say, there have been some cases, progressively, I mean, we are seeing some good decisions, you know. There was this case of the CK case, you know, against the Commissioner of Police, you know. And the court was able, through our legal frameworks and the Constitution, to prove that at least the accused was did not follow the due process. He violated the Constitution in his handling of the survivor. So again, that is what maybe survivors need to bank on, to just be able to have hope that one day justice will come. But as we say this, for me, I'm saying there's need for coordinated effort by all players. And when I talk about all players, this is both the government, sorry, and the non-state actors. We really need to work closely together to just ensure that we address this issue of GBV. For instance, civil society, we do research, you know. We have information that could be used by government to be able to, put in place necessary measures geared towards ending gender-based violence.
Yeah, and we hope that this will be done as soon as possible, really, to again end cases of GBV. All right, and Sadat, our time is far much spent. So you went through what you went through. We went at Dadako. Unfortunately, she passed on. And now that sasa tunaelekea electioneering period, na vile ulikuwa umesema earlier on, unaogopa. Like, unaogopa kwa sababu haujui outcome itakuwaje, hatujui vile elections zitaenda. Yeah. So ujumbe wako ni nini, especially to the people, serikali pia, and all these political parties, and especially wale wanafanya campaign sahi?
Mi yangu tu ni peace kwa wanasiasa. Wakati wakiwa wanafanya campaign, wajaribu kuongea kuhusu amani, kuhusu upendo ya watu, kuweka watu karibu, waache ukabila, waangalie, watuchukue kama sisi, juu hao sana sana wanasiasa, hao ndo wanatumia hao watu kwenda kufanya violence. So wajaribu kuona hao watu wenye wanatumwa, ingekuwa ni watu wao ndo wametumiwa hao watu waende wafanyiwe hiyo violence, wangekuwa wanasikiaje? Before ikuje ikue kwa watu wao wenyewe ndo wajaribu kustop. Sisi hatuna nguvu ya kustop. NGOs hawana nguvu ya kustop. Wakuna nguvu ya kusaidia, but wao serikali wao ndo kuna power ya kuingia kati ya kuzuia vitu kama hizo. So yangu tu ni peace kwa wanasiasa, wajaribu kueneza amani. Alafu wajaribu create security, na kama kuna security hawezi create security venye inafaa. Wachukue hata kama watu angalau wapeleke kwa police camp, angalau wakae hapo ndani kama wakimbizi. Sisi wakimbizi angalau for security yetu. Hapo ndio tunaweza kuwa safe. Because huko ndani mashinani ndani kuna manjia zingine maskari hawezi ingilia. Na obviously haiko safe. Maskari wao kama waneka security kwa barabara peke yake. Wakati wako kwa barabara wenye huko ndani sasa kwa makona huko, hao ndio wanafanya hizo wahalifu. Na hao maskari wenyewe wanaogopa kuingia ndani. So kungekuwa na uwezekano tungekuwa hata kwa camp angalau wenye wako ndani kwa corridor wachukuliwa wapeleke kwa camp, angalau waiko pamoja, security kuwe hapo. Kuliko sisi tukue tu hivi. Kuna watu ambao hawajiwezi, disabilities. Na homa disabilities, mmoja wa survivors kama mimi na ni wanaume. Sasa homa disability watasaidika aje? Sasa hiyo cases ya campaign kikuja watasaidika aje? Hawezi kimbia, wengine hawezi ongea. Wakati walikuwa wamesodomaiziwa, wameripiwa, imeaffect akili yao. Mental illness wanakonaye mpaka saizi. Watu kama watasaidika aje? Na namba inaongezeka. So ningependa serikali isiongoje alam ifanyike hiyo 2022 alafu ndio wakuja wafikirie 2027. That's the time.
Okay, this is the time. And right now, unaweza sema ukoaje, unaendeleaje wewe both mentally, physically, of course, sustain a bit of injuries, and ulifikia wakati ambao ulisamehe, especially wale waliowavamia and did whatever they did kwako na dadako?
Yeah. For now nilikuwa naangalia wale wenye walikuwa wametudhulumu, haribia maisha, walikuwa uhuru. Nilikuwa nawaona wakati wakipita, but imekuwa mwaka kadhaa, saizi imekuwa 16 years wenye nasema, na wakakuja wakapotea, hawakuwa wanaonekana. Na for now mimi nitasema thanks sana, nitashukuru sana kwa organization kama yenye Madam Annette natoka ndani na Madam Alberto natoka ndani. Hao ndio wamenishikilia, wamenichukua kama brother yao, na pain zao na stress zangu na pain zangu zote hao ndio wamekuwa wameibeba. Na wakati kama niko na shida, in case of anything emergency, hao ndio wanakuwa wananisaidia.
Asante sana, Sadat, for just coming by and sharing your story. And Alberta, because I can see our time is far much spent, as far as then just building capacity. And this is both in all areas, just to making sure that we end cases of gender-based violence. Like, again, in a few years to come, we don't really have to speak about cases of gender-based violence. What more needs to be done? Because as a country, when it comes to implementation is where we have a big problem. So then what needs to be done, really, to just make sure that we end this as soon as possible?
Okay. So there are great strides that have happened. Even the National Police Service, for example, they have a hotline, they're doing the polycare centers, so there is deliberate effort to do that. I'd like to mention also then what needs to be done. We have 12 commitments under the Generational Equality Forum that it is a global commitments that Kenya co-chairs with the UK. And in those, then they're summarized into 4 action points. So what needs to be done is, one, make sure that we have services, you know, for gender-based violence, responsive services that are survivor-centered for the survivors in case violence happens. So that includes, with everything else, with the GBV principles included. Then again, in terms of prevention, we need to build capacities of everyone, you know, really targeted narrative messaging, actions, interventions, for example, around behavior change, you know, a shift in social norms, positive masculinity, engage everyone else, as we said, everyone needs to be accountable at all levels, you know, at all ages and all levels. Again, on the issue of data, but not just collecting data, but also having meaningful, you know, evidence, the research that we were talking about earlier, so that then you have evidence-based programming, you know, that's survivor-centered and actually also has, it's ethically, you know, safe, for example, for everyone else and especially for the survivors, so that then whatever we are doing makes sense, or rather all goes towards that. And you rightfully say that we have all these policies, including the gender prevention and, you know, and response policy that was revised just last year. So there are all these guidelines that and policies that we're able to work around. And then again, we need to prioritize funding. We need to prioritize funding and allocate resources. Otherwise, we're just here, we keep on talking, but exactly what is the commitment, you know, by the government? The same way we are, you know, putting funds for infrastructure, for what, we need to really prioritize funding. You had how many shelf shelters are there, and they're private. You had the T-Rope Angels doing shelters. Yes, it's all our responsibilities, but you can clearly see that as much as government is putting effort, and I totally understand it's everyone's effort, is, you know, location is even at the workplace, you know, even at whatever spaces, even here at Nation, it needs to be safe for you to come and work here and go home. So it's really being very deliberate. So those, for me, those 4 areas is then we need to put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah, deliberate commitments to ending this. Okay, and then, Annette, very quickly as we're finishing, especially as far as election is concerned, in like 30 seconds.
Thanks. Yeah, and I wanted to add political goodwill as well. I mean, we need that. And as far as election is concerned, I mean, we all know right now we are in an electioneering period. We see heightened political temperatures characterized by political intolerance as well. You know, what does that mean? We are seeing hate speech left, right, and center. That alone is a ground to breed violence. So already, if this is not curtailed, we are going to see violence, you know. And as this is happening, again, I mean, I have my brother here, for instance, we are all planning to get into, to exercise our political rights. He is in fear, and other survivors of 2017 GBV, sexual gender-based violence, and also 2007, 2008 are in fear. What are we doing, you know? And the only way we can be able to support also in them accessing justice is for us to take responsibility. The government plays its bit, civil society and all other partners, I mean, including the general public. Let's take responsibility by ensuring that within our mandate, we play our role.
Play a role. I like that. Okay, and we have to end the show right now. Do we finish with feedback because we have a lot of them? Let's hear what you have to say. But of course, time is not on our side. We have to say a special thank you to Alberta Omboa, Executive Director, Gender Violence Recovery Center, Sadat Abdullahi, Gender-Based Violence Survivor, Annette Nerima, Program Manager, Kenya Human Rights Commission, as well as Viola Chepto Legat, who is an athlete and of course joined us via Zoom. We have to say very, very thank you. Very special thank you again to all of you for waking up in the early mornings and coming by to our studios today and just to have this conversation that really needs to be talked about, and that is as far as gender-based violence is concerned. So maybe feedback of what you had to say really as far as the question that we asked you, and that is who should be held accountable as far as cases of gender-based violence is concerned in the country. Let's hear what you have to say. So Nashim Albert says, the society, it is all in our hands to change it, all right? And then this one says that gender-based violence started immediately when the law started favoring girl child. It is unfortunate that if a woman makes mistakes in the house, I will have to deal with her in the house unless they will be favored in the court of law. All right, so that is what you have to say as far as the topic, and we cannot read all of them in the interest of time, but keep the conversation going on our social media platforms. But for now, it is goodbye. My name is Winnie Lubembe. Enjoy your weekend. See you on Monday.